Hello, readers. I'm Amira, Mistress of the Dark, and the show, as you know, is the 13 Nights of Halloween. It's a real scream. Fiction draws inspiration from the real world. It must, to be relatable to the reader, and because, for the most part, well-constructed stories are based on what the writer knows well. The more the writer appears to know the topic of what they're writing, the more accurately it can be depicted, and thus the less the reader must suspend their disbelief. Befitting of the season, we'll be discussing the creepy, the spooky, the weird, and the frightening, as allegedly experienced not by any fictional characters, but by the authors themselves. We'll start with Whitley Strieber, who claims to have been the victim of kidnapping by creatures out of this world. Brought to our world in 1945, Strieber began his authorial career with The Wolfen and The Hunger, each written in the 80s to world renown, eventually being translated into the film medium. Multiple bestsellers followed, as well as the experience that would come to define how our world perceived him. In 1989, Communion was published. This book details the events of Boxing Day, 1985, when Strieber awoke to find himself being carried out of his home and into a tent in the woods. Here, he was beaten, poked, and prodded, though he was unable to identify the attackers. However, he did note the observers of the event, a circle of giant insects and masked, trollish creatures. Also present was an old friend whom Strieber learned after the fact had died several months earlier. In the following years, Strieber claimed to have more experiences with the assailants, known as the Visitors. These included being in flagrante delicto, having metal implanted in his ear, encounters with blue men. Perhaps it was the Blue Man Group? How long have they been around? He also detailed out-of-body experiences and strange childhood episodes. This poster child for alien abduction tried to further clarify his viewpoint on the various adventures, saying, "My first books were unfortunate in one aspect, in that they were so vividly written that readers and the media looked at them as descriptions of experience, rather than descriptions of perception. There's a great deal of difference between the two." Next, we have Jan Potocki, whose dog days of his life you could liken to a real horror tale. Born in Ukraine in 1761, Potocki was a globetrotter and military man, born into wealth. This multilingual man's magnum opus, the Manuscript found in Saragossa, touched on a variety of genres and concerned Potocki's countless interests, concerns, and travels. As a French officer stated, "It was all about brigands, ghosts, and Kabbalists. Nothing could be more suitable to divert my mind from the rigors of the campaign than to read a novel full of strange adventures." After completing the book, Potocki began work on a new project, filing a silver sugar bowl lid. A year's worth of daily silver filings were collected and reshaped into a bullet. Potocki took the completed bullet to a local priest and requested that it be blessed. After receiving the blessing, Potocki loaded the bullet into a gun and shot it directly into his brain. For you see, due to the presence of a mental illness known as lycanthropy, Jan Potocki had convinced himself that he was, in fact, a werewolf. And so, Potocki's life came to a bloody end. Lastly, we have the operatic life of French novelist Boris Vian. In 1920, Vian joined the world as a sickly child, later predicting his death by the age of 40. He eventually made it to 39. Boris Vian trained as an engineer, pursued jazz on the notes of his trumpet, and made Duke Ellington the godfather to his daughter. In spite of jazz being Vian's life force, he became most notable for the social disruption of his 1946 novel, I Spit on Your Graves. Not to be confused with the movie I Spit on Your Grave. See, singular, plural, we're talking about the plural one. This novel was set in the United States and revolved around sexual and racial conflict, following the story of a black man with a white complexion. While the content of the book riled up the audience, its popularity was actually thanks to a murder. While the entire tale of the gruesome death is difficult to find, we do know that a man strangled his mistress in a Montparnasse hotel, leaving an open copy of the book on the bedside table. Circled and underlined was the passage, I again felt that strange sensation that ran up my back as my hand closed on her throat, and I couldn't stop myself. It came. It was so strong that I let her go. The book was reprinted and sold 500,000 copies. Irony was eventually the death of him. At a 1959 screening of I Spit on Your Graves, again, plural, not singular, after disowning the film and requesting removal of his name from the work, Vian himself appeared at the screening. And it's rumored that he said, "These guys are supposed to be American? My ass." He then collapsed back into his seat and suffered a fatal heart attack. Once again, I am Amira, Mistress of the Dark, your dark and beautiful hostess for the 13 Nights of Halloween. Thank you for joining me for this night of creepy, weird, supernatural tales. Please make sure to like, subscribe, be my friend or my enemy on social media, and I will see all of you tomorrow night. Bye, friends.